นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. The month of May, perhaps just out of habit, is a time when we recollect the Buddha, particularly the historical Buddha, the life of the Buddha. It's the time when we recollect the birth, enlightenment and parinibbana of the Buddha. It's always both a joy to remember the Buddha, but also, you might say, amazing or astounding even that we still have the Buddhist teachings in the world today. We still have the Tripitaka, the teachings and the monastic discipline and the Abhidhamma, the Buddhist psychology, available to us in this day and age. We have Buddhist Sangha still in the world, monasteries, temples, and Buddhist lay followers who practice the same teachings that originated with the Buddha in northern India all those years ago. And sometimes you can gain strength from that. You think that there have been people practicing these teachings, dana, sila, bhavana, continuously from the time of the Buddha up to the present day. That's not an absolute guarantee that the teachings are correct or true, but it's certainly a good sign that these teachings have some real value and they do point to the truth. Otherwise they probably would have disappeared long ago. And because the suttas in particular were remembered, committed to memory, like the original suttas and teachings of the Buddha were passed down as an oral tradition. So they were memorized by monks and then recited, often in groups, so that many monks could remember the same teachings and then pass them from one generation to the next. So even though it was an oral tradition, it's been handed down very well, remembered. We can't be absolutely sure of the accuracy of that tradition, but generally there seems to be a lot that we can take as true. The word of the Buddha, Buddha Vachana, and because many of the different traditions, say over the years, Buddhism has, like you would expect, because that's the way human beings are, it's developed this few different strands or teachings or schools of Buddhism, we do have variations, but there is enough in common for the different schools to give you confidence that the Buddha and the original teachings that we still have, there's some, you can have some confidence that they are true. Probably the main way we get confidence in the truth and the effectiveness of the Buddhist path is through practicing it. Because when you practice, you're verifying for yourself, proving for yourself, finding out for yourself that these teachings are effective for helping us to understand the truth about ourselves, this body and mind, the world, and particularly for ending suffering. So in brief, you could say they work. The teachings work, and people have found that they have worked for them over the centuries right down to the present day. So it's a living tradition and an effective teaching and way for people to end suffering. And we practice Buddhism, you might say, on two levels. There's the immediate ending of stress and suffering, day by day, moment by moment, which most people are interested in, and that's often how people come to the Buddhist teachings. But there's the second level, the deeper level, is that these teachings are pointing the way to the complete liberation from, we say, the round of birth and death, samsara. And that's what nirvana is. Enlightenment means the end of birth and death. We call it the deathless. And that's considered the highest happiness, not having to be born again, not having to face the same old problems, aches and pains, challenges of being born a human again and again and again. Getting off the treadmill of suffering. So there's these two levels that the teachings are helping us to realize the truth of ending stress and suffering right here, right now, day by day. But then also coming to the ultimate happiness of the end of birth and death, going beyond karma, good and bad karma, which is central to the teachings, the teaching on karma. But then there's also the teaching that nirvana is going beyond karma. An arahant, someone who's attained nirvana, who could be anyone, male, female, from any background, we all have the opportunity to practice for nirvana and realize nirvana. The one who's realized nirvana is no longer making karma. Whatever they do is just action. They call it giriya, which means just action but without karmic consequences. So people who've reached nirvana tend to do a lot of good because they can teach other people the way to nirvana. And they're a great blessing for the world to have them around. But they don't actually make karma as they help other people. They just do it out of pure compassion, pure wisdom, pure compassion, without seeking anything in return. But they don't have to practice for anything anymore because they've already done that. They've reached nirvana. We say they've reached the other shore. They've reached the end of suffering. Meanwhile, we as disciples of the Buddha or students of the Buddha, we're still cultivating the path of practice, the Noble Eightfold Path. So we're still within the round of samsara and making karma. As we just chanted, a huge part of our practice is cultivating the path, making good karma and abandoning bad karma, stopping making bad karma. And the best kind of karma is the karma that ends karma. By completing the Noble Eightfold Path, one ends karma by having insight into not self. The reason we still make karma, even good karma, is because we still have attachment to self. And therefore we have goals, we have things we're trying to do. Even attaining Nibbana is a goal that you work towards, or make karma that goes towards Nibbana. But when we cultivate the path, we're developing the insight into the conditioned nature of this life, this world, this life that we lead. And that ultimately takes us beyond karma, the karma-making process, you might say. There's a very common question people ask, if I practice what the Buddha taught, do I have to believe in karma? Well, maybe in the beginning you can believe in karma, just take it on the level of belief. Because in the beginning of our practice we don't really know, do we? We don't know Nibbana yet, we haven't experienced it, we don't necessarily know many things that the Buddha taught. But it may make sense, it may seem logical, reasonable what the Buddha's taught, what other teachers we meet teach. So it's quite possible you might take up the teachings on karma just on the level of belief first. But over time, over practice, you're verifying them, you're proving that it's true. So then the idea is that you know for yourself karma is true. There is such a thing as good karma, wholesome actions that bring their fruits, their consequences in form of different kinds of happiness and benefit for ourselves and others. And then there is such a thing as bad karma. We can hurt ourselves, hurt others, do things that cause suffering for ourselves and others. And by reflecting on this over and over again, becoming more aware of the kind of karma we're making, meaning aware of our own actions and the consequences of the actions and our behavior, we no longer just have to believe in karma as a good idea or a theory about life, but it becomes something you just know and see at work all the time. One part of the development of, say, wisdom and understanding in Buddhism is coming to see that karma is true, so then you quite naturally shy away from making bad karma because you know it will come back on you. And you get energy and effort to cultivate good karma because you know it is supportive of your happiness, the happiness of others. It makes sense, however hard it can be sometimes to make good karma and avoid making bad karma. But it just makes sense, you get energy and motivation to do that. And the more you do it, the less you doubt, the less confusion you have, well then you pursue the path maybe into ever deeper levels of understanding. Because you have less and less doubt, less and less confusion, then you're more willing to commit yourself more sincerely, more energetically to the practice. The idea being that the more you learn what the path of practice is, and you avoid the pitfalls and the mistakes, then it's only a matter of time before you reach Nibbana, the end of suffering. So they compare it to a log going downstream of a river. It's like in the old days here, the Yarra River used to be used by loggers. They'd cut the gum trees in the forest, drag them, or use their little simple railroads to get the logs to the river, and then they would float them down the Yarra River all the way to the sea, where Melbourne is. If those logs don't get stuck on a rock or on the bank or somehow run aground, then they're guaranteed to reach the river. It may take time, depends on how much water's in the river and all those kind of things, but eventually they'll reach the ocean and can be used for or sold. But the Buddha said it's like that for one practicing this path. If you keep cultivating and developing the path, and you don't let yourself get snagged on the river bank, caught up by things, distracted, or sunk through your own mistaken actions, then eventually you'll reach nirvana. But how quick, how slow, how smooth your path is, well, that varies. Partly again on karma, on your karma, but you're guaranteed, if you keep following the path, eventually you'll reach the ocean, eventually you'll reach nirvana. So if you think about it, it's one of the most kind of positive things you could hear, that there's always a way out of suffering. There's always a way to reach the end of suffering. But the main purpose of karma is it comes back to our own actions, doesn't it? It comes back to our own actions and the results of our actions. The onus is on us to train, to practice. And what we tend to do is always look around for the easy option. So we like to pray to the gods, or a god, or some higher being. Or sometimes the easiest option is just say it's all random anyway, there's no point even trying. And we undermine our own efforts. But the Buddha encouraged us to observe and learn through our practice. You really observe what's going on in your mind, which is why we come to meditate and practice meditation, but also just to reflect day by day on your actions and the consequences of your actions. What leads to what? And the Buddha set aside questions about whether there is a God or the gods. They're not so relevant. More relevant is, what are you thinking, saying, doing day by day? How are you acting in the world, in your life? Because that's where karma is at work. We're making good karma or bad karma. And that's something you can observe and learn from every moment of every day. Why we make karma is because we have this sense of self. And where does that come from? Well, it comes from avijja, ignorance, not knowing. Vichar. Vichar is knowing or knowledge. Means without. Without knowing, without knowledge, we make karma because we have a sense of self. That's something we have to investigate. The Buddha was always encouraging us to gain knowledge, and not only book knowledge and the theoretical knowledge of the Dhamma, but direct personal knowledge from your own experience. Which you can only get by cultivating these factors of the path, developing mindfulness, investigation of the Dhamma, the Noble Eightfold Path. He actually guaranteed, if you're willing to listen to the teachings and then apply them in your behavior and apply them in your life, you're guaranteed to free yourself from suffering. But there has to be that gaining of the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma, hearing it, reading it, remembering it, understanding it internally, and then putting it into practice. And we have to put the Dhamma into practice, not simply believe it or know it superficially. But if you put the Dhamma into practice, you cultivate sila, samadhi, panya consciously, sincerely, then you're guaranteed to free your mind from suffering. How quickly, how slowly, again, it depends on karma. And as the more we practice, you notice, well, that sometimes you have obstructions come up. The Buddha further explained that about karma, is that they have. It's not always simple. Do this and that happens. We also have a whole accumulation of karma from the past, bringing results, good and bad, and some of it's supportive. What they call upatampapa karma. Supportive factors that come up, like just coming to meet a teacher or hear the teachings, is very supportive karma because it makes you think, gives you guidance on how to practice. Say, associating with fellow practitioners, Kalyana Mitta, these are very good supportive karma. Being in a supportive place, a place that's peaceful, secure, you're not struggling because there's lots of people trying to attack you or oppress you or bully you. All kinds of good supportive conditions will support our practice of the Dhamma. And that's the result of, say, good karma in the past that we've made. Good health, having a healthy body that you can use to practice. It's very difficult to, say, learn meditation if you're ill, or if you have some physical disability, it starts to limit you. It's not impossible, but it's harder. But then we've also got obstructive and destructive karma. Upapilaka kamma. It's like obstructive karma. You want to sit down and meditate, and then someone next door turns on their lawnmower or their chainsaw. You've got to work with intense sound. Or you're practicing the Dhamma and you have an accident, get injured, or you get ill. Or you have people around you who are not supportive, so they really don't want you to learn meditation or don't want you to understand the Buddhist teachings. Maybe they're against the Buddhist teachings. Maybe they have belief in another religion. Upakata kamma is karma that actually cuts you off from doing good. Kata kamma means kill. So it's like karma that comes up and just kills your efforts in the Dhamma. So that could be, again, it could be illness and injury, or even death itself. People, sometimes in the middle of their practice, they die. Their life is cut short through old age, sickness, or accident and injury. And it's not uncommon. People are, they start a retreat, say, they go on a retreat, they've made their plans, go on retreat, and then suddenly they fall ill on the first day, or even before they get to the retreat, or they have some serious injury that stops them going on their retreat. It's quite common that you hear about somebody who wants to ordain as a monk and then they go and have a car accident or something. It's what we call upakata kamma. It actually cuts off or destroys or kills off their chance to do good, or at least certainly limits it. When people are doing dana, you hear they have some kind of real obstruction comes up, and they're about to do something really good, and then they can't fulfill it, something goes wrong. So we have to deal not only with just simple good and bad karma and their results, but there's supportive karma, there's obstructive karma, there's destructive karma, there's habitual karma is another one. We're dealing, as you practice meditation, you notice a lot of habitual karma, ajina karma, ways of thinking that you've thought it 100 times before, so you easily think it again. And people get themselves into all kinds of suffering by maybe just holding on to negative trains of thought. When you become depressed, it depends on the kind of depression you're experiencing, but partly it's just you keep thinking negative thoughts, so that becomes just a habit you're stuck in, always seeing the negative side, finding fault with yourself, with others, holding on to memories of things that went wrong. Just thinking like that over and over again. Habitual karma. Of course, we can have a habitual positive karma, so like learning to meditate, and doing it over and over again, practicing kindness and generosity over and over again, keeping precepts over and over again until it's just normal for you not to think of killing, stealing, committing acts of sexual misconduct and so on. So habitual karma can be good and bad. There's very powerful kinds of karma as well, very heavy karma, but again, good and bad. So in Buddhism, the Buddha described the worst kinds of heavy karma are trying to kill a Buddha, like Devadatta, rolled the rock down the hill and tried to get the elephant to squash the Buddha. Failed, but just the attempt was a very powerful negative karma. Or killing an arahant, an enlightened being, somebody who's practiced so well and freed their mind from suffering, but for whatever reason, jealousy, rage, or just misguided views, somebody can try and kill an arahant or even kill them. It happens. Or killing parents, mother and father. These are the worst kinds of karma and obstruct the practitioner from attaining nirvana in this lifetime. And then there's very powerful good kinds of karma. So like if somebody attains jhana, that's such a boost to their practice, such a powerful good force in their consciousness that will be a cause for further good meditation, further experience of samadhi, and maybe somebody will develop really clear insight, because developing states of samadhi, deep states of samadhi, jhana, has such a purifying effect on your mindfulness, on your mind, that then to see wrong views, see attachment, see craving and attachment, maybe it becomes very clear. When you attain a deep state of samadhi, it's like you feel like before you were walking around in the dark, walking around at night. Say if you walk around in the forest at night and you don't have a torch, or you have a very bad torch or a very small torch, you trip over things, don't you? You bump into trees, you trip over tree roots. If you're in this monastery, you might even bump into a deer or a wombat. I just came out of my kuti and there was a deer standing right there, and so I got blasted by a deer just now because I didn't see it. I wasn't using a torch. So the deer honked into my face. If you don't have a good torch, you walk around, you trip over, you bump into things. But if you attain a deep state of samadhi, it's such an enlightening experience. It's not yet nibbana, but Ajahn Chah used to say it's very close to nibbana, because suddenly your mind is illuminated and you see everything, even in the dark. It's like you turn the light switch on and you see everything. The truth is illuminated, your cause and effect is illuminated, so karma becomes very obvious. What is good and bad, karma, cause and effect, the impermanent nature of the five khandhas becomes very clear when your mind is still and peaceful in samadhi. And what particularly becomes clear when you attain samadhi is that craving is the cause of suffering. Craving is like movements of mind. We say the real root cause is avijja, ignorance. But ignorance is such a deep, subtle part of the mind. Craving is really the active cause of suffering. It's more obvious to contemplate and gain insight into craving as the cause of suffering. So this is why in so many Buddhist teachings, craving, tanha, is seen as the cause of suffering. But if you attain samadhi, stillness of mind, that reveals the suffering that comes from craving. Just the movement of the mind is revealed as suffering. It's tiring to follow thoughts of craving. Desire, aversion, desire to become, to get, to have, to experience, to want. Craving is like, in Thai they say it's like the lack of peace, really. It's this sense of lack. Something's missing, so you're always looking. So it's a kind of a thirst or a hunger of mind. You're not content. Craving is discontent. But we don't even notice it. We're so used to it that we don't notice it, because our mind is constantly running with the craving, so you don't notice what you're actually moving with or running with. Only maybe when it really builds up to be a very strong, powerful kind of craving, where you perhaps notice the suffering of it then. But much of the day we are falling into craving we don't even realize. Wanting this, not wanting that. But if you cultivate the path and develop mindfulness and then the stillness of samadhi, or even jhana, such powerful good karma that craving is exposed. So even if you haven't completely abandoned craving, it's such a boost on your practice that it speeds you along. It's like getting a full tank of petrol, or eating your meal. You've got all this energy to really practice, because you know exactly what the problem is now. No doubt. If you go back to the comparison, if it's like turning on the light in the dark. Once you turn on the light in a dark room or in a dark forest, you see everything, so there's no doubt where things are, what is what. And because there's no doubt, then you really know what you have to do. And craving is to be abandoned. To abandon it, you have to recognize it. And many people in their meditation, they have this problem. We always say, oh, desire is to be abandoned, so then how on earth am I going to do anything without desire? Of course, you need wholesome desire, kusala chanda, to meditate. That comes from hearing the Dhamma, reflecting on the Dhamma, from faith, from wisdom. But to know the difference between craving and wholesome desire, you need to illuminate your mind, and you'll see it. Craving slips into our meditation all the time. Craving for results. So when am I going to be peaceful? Why aren't I peaceful? Why am I thinking this? Why am I thinking too much? When am I going to get enlightened? Why did the Buddha make it so hard to meditate, etc., etc.? This is all craving, the craving of meditators, you might call it. It comes up all the time, and half the time we don't even notice it. It's only when you start to notice craving and you take a step back, you'll grow weary of it and you want to let go of it and step back from it. But if ever you are successful in attaining a state of one-pointedness, samadhi, that process is speeded up because then craving is highlighted for what it is. Endless movements of mind that are never leading to satisfaction or peace. You always want more. Even when you get what you want more. Bigger, better, or repeated pleasure. You say with sensual craving, you always want, even when you get what you want, you just want it to have it over and over again. The whole point of samadhi is it brings you this fullness, stillness, completeness of mind, where the craving is temporarily, it's gone, it's abandoned. And if craving starts to come up again, you notice it because it's different than the stillness. It's not peaceful like stillness and samadhi. It's not satisfying. It's not peaceful. It's not unified. Like samadhi is unification of mind. All your energy gathers together so you feel bright, energized. Craving is dispersing all your mental energy so it makes you feel mentally tired, stressed, dissatisfied, discontent, unhappy, miserable, suffering. It's a totally different experience, and only when your mind becomes clear does that really become clear to you. And we all know, as I said, the most coarse or strongest kinds of craving, well, we probably already had an insight into that as suffering, a cause of suffering. But there's many subtle cravings that we don't notice. So as your mind unifies in samadhi, these subtle kinds of craving are exposed. The craving for bliss, the craving for different experiences associated with the practice of meditation, they become clear. I want to be peaceful again. The dissatisfaction when you're not peaceful becomes clear. Samadhi fades and then you get annoyed that you're not peaceful again. As Lungta Mahabua used to say, when he was first practicing, he attained samadhi and then he lost it, and he attained it and then he lost it. It was such a frustrating experience. If he could blame that on some other person, he would have gone and punched them on the nose. Because it was so annoying to lose samadhi. But that's what happens, isn't it? Samadhi is still what we call a sankhara. It's a conditioned phenomena that arises and ceases. It's a part of the path, but it's not yet nibbana. It brings you closer to nibbana, but it's not nibbana. Nibbana is permanent. Nibbana doesn't degenerate, but states of peace, calm that we attain do degenerate, and then you start looking around to blame someone. You either blame someone else, maybe someone was bothering you, or someone gave you some work to do, or there was some noise and you blame them, or you blame yourself, your own weakness for following the distracted thoughts or whatever. It's a very common part of the meditator's experience, is blaming someone for losing your state of calm or losing your mindfulness. But really there's no person there, because it's all not self. It's just causes and conditions, and samadhi is impermanent. Samadhi is a conditioned state of mind. It degenerates, and you have to go back and develop it again. But in terms of karma, if you attain some samadhi, it's such a powerful karmic conditioning force, well then it will help you to attain it again. This is why some people, the very first time they meditate, they have a really deep, profound meditation when they get really peaceful. Almost certainly they've done it before, and they do it again. The same with wisdom, insight. The most powerful kind of karma is insight into the three characteristics, because that really liberates your mind from delusion, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. Insight into that is the most powerful karma, best kind of karma. So the Buddha encouraged us to really look into karma, not just to believe it, but to really use it as a tool to investigate experience. Our aim is to end karma, not to keep getting stuck into craving and attachment. Actually end karma. Another one of those karmas, ahosi karma, is karma that ends karma. So like for hostility, when you have constantly remembering somebody that hurt you, or you had some argument with, or some real falling out with, when you finally get tired of all that anger and you want to heal your mind, then you practice ahosi karma, the karma for the ending of hostility. You have to really want to end the hostility. It's like complete unconditional ending of hostilities. Like when two countries have a war and they sign a treaty and they say unconditional peace. They're not asking for anything else from the other side. You notice when you meditate, you may still have hostility there for a person, and you may say, well, I never do anything to them, I never hurt them, I'm finished with any anger towards them. But then if you investigate your mind a little bit more closely, there may be a little bit of something left, as long as they don't do what I don't want them to do, or as long as they don't cause me trouble, then I'll end the hostility. There's that condition, it's conditional ending of hostility, it's not unconditional. But if you really want to follow the Buddhist path, free your mind from greed, anger and delusion, there has to be unconditional ending of hostility. No more harbouring of any grudge, any aversion, ill will, hatred. It's ahosi karma. You're ending your own intention to harm that person who maybe you have thought of harming before. People often have this belief that you can do it by going to see someone or doing some ceremony, or going to see a monk or do some ceremony to end your past karma, because maybe they're feeling guilty, they've got a lot of bad karma with other people and they want to get a quick fix, end it. The only real way to do it is to go into your own mind. Maybe you receive teachings, but you have to go into your own mind and change intention. You cultivate what we call samma sankappa, right intention. Give up the intention to hurt, and give up the intention to ill will, cruelty, hatred, and cultivate kindness and compassion until the intention to hurt, harm never arises again. That's what we call a stream winner in Buddhism. Somebody who's entered the stream of Dhamma, they no longer experience the intention to hurt or harm others. They may still have some mild aversion arise, say they have some pain and they might feel some negativity towards their pain or something. They have no more wish to harm others through their speech, their actions. It's gone. They've really gone into their mind and rooted that out to the point there's just no room left in the mind. The conditioning process is such that the thought to harm others doesn't arise, animal or human. simply is no longer part of the mental activity of that person. They say Sotapanna is defined partly by that just keep the 5 precepts normally. They don't have the intention to steal, harm others in any way. And to do that, you have to really want to end karmic hostilities with other people, which takes effort, work, but this is what we're doing. This is the best kind of karma human beings can make, the karma that ends karma. So maybe I'll leave you with these reflections tonight.